Ricky Roach. Purchase lot 2, parcel 2, I think. Back corner of the International Falls business. He did present a proposal to the regular meeting last week. This year, Paul, how do you want to do it?
Mr. Chair, we've also invited Attorney Steve Shimon with us today to also provide some perspective on this. And one of the things that we talked about in the initial proposal was that historically what we've done is when we look at incentivizing is a new jobs component as part of the business park. We did create some guidelines for the business park, and first and foremost is new jobs and new job creation. Then it's wage level, then it's investment and tax base. Those are kind of the guidelines that we adopted at some back when we created the park. So the first lot that was sold, or was actually we incentivized, we gave the property $2 with some clawback provisions. The original owners did not live up to the clawback, to the proposal, so we did have an appraisal in 2005, Pancho Cranston and appraisal for us for $20,000 for the land. So they did not live up to the proposal, so they did pay back the $20,000. So as we've progressed here, that is part of the discussion that the job creation, wage and wage level, and overall investment are part of the larger discussion around citing anybody in the park, whether it's here or the foreign trade zone. The other thing is that we don't have a lot of development sites that are zoned properly, that have utilities. So that's another part of the discussion and consideration. So we do not have a lot of sites in and around the area. So with that, Steve, we briefed you a little bit on this and the multimodal and the other discussions we've had around incentivizing. Any thoughts you might bring to the table?
Well, again, just to reiterate what you said, Keita adopted some guidelines for these some time ago. And I think that the board would, when the business park was created, had a purpose for what was essentially job creation, being the most important thing. And I think the board, you do reserve the right to modify those criteria at any time. So the fact that you've had these criteria in the past doesn't mean they would need to necessarily be followed at this point in time. But if you weren't going to follow these, then I would think you would want to modify them in some fashion. I think that there are, and certainly Ricky Roach and the Roach family, they've been tremendous business people in the community forever. And I think part of the whole process is not just trying to bring new people to town, but to assist existing businesses and the types of things that they are doing. It's partially about that as well. But I think, at least as it's been explained to me, and I wasn't here to hear the presentation that Mr. Roach made, but if the proposal is that there's not going to be any new job creation, that would seem to fly in the face of the existing guidelines that are there. I think also the things, these were guidelines were developed at a time when there were a number of parcels. I mean, when it was, originally the park was put in, there were, 7 different lots. And I think this was probably done at a time when we didn't realize wetlands was the big issue it is today. And so those that are on the south side of the street there, for all practical purposes today, because of wetlands issues, may not be very useful. And lots 1 and 2 have been taken care of. So what you're looking at is really the last parcel, as I understand it, Kia has, that's really development ready. Utilities are in there. There need to be some street improvements and things, but to a large extent, it's ready to go. And so this would be the last remaining parcel that Kia has, the only current one that's ready. You've got the foreign trade zone, there's a bunch of acreage out there, but that doesn't have utilities, it's not ready to the extent that this parcel is. And so I think that is something to be considered as well. The board, everybody's anxious for there to be some positive things to happen in the community. Clearly, construction of a large building like this, it's going to increase the tax base. It's going to create some construction jobs on a temporary basis. There's definitely positives associated with it. It's basically a balancing test to determine, is what's being offered sufficient to warrant transfer with some incentives, some less than market value to a proposed developer, and that's what the board would need to decide. Certainly, what's being proposed, if the board wanted it to happen, would not be illegal in any sense, but I think it may require some tweaking of the guidelines, or at least addressing all of those. And again, you've got transfer of property by a public entity, so once a tentative agreement is put together, there probably would need to be a public hearing of some sort for the board to receive input from the public before making its final decision. I don't know if any board members have specific questions or
Questions from the board? Further discussion? Mr. Roach?
I was just reading through some of the stuff on here for the Gmail you guys got from somebody wanting to know about public finance and stuff like that. I don't need to get finance from Kia. I've got the money to build a building. And my idea is job relocation. I've got a business right now I'm working with to relocate and move 5 full-time employees, actually 6 full-time employees, and 3 part-time employees into the business park to run another different building. The building they are in right now is falling down. It's leaks. You have to leave the water running in during the wintertime so the water don't freeze. So my idea is build them a brand new building to bring them into the industrial park. And if I don't get that business, I will put a business in there for cold weather testing or whatever else to move them out of the salvage yard that I'm running them in right now.
And would that create any?
It would not create any new jobs, no. It would not. But my cold weather testers bring in lots of money into the community. They are here for 2.5 to 3 months out of the year. And the amount of money they spend in International Falls with the motels, the gas, the food, and all the stuff they buy is tremendous for International Falls.
Okay, but, all right. Fine. Any other comments from board members? Yes, go ahead.
Steve, good, last part of your presentation, you talked about if we did anything outside of what this guideline is, we would have to have further discussions. We said that, I mean, wouldn't be breaking any law, but we possibly should public meeting or have discussions further before we go outside of what the guidelines are.
Well, I think anytime, even following the guidelines, anytime you have a public entity like KEDA, whether it be the county or the city or anything else, if you are selling land that you own, you're supposed to have a public hearing to receive input so that the public knows the terms of the proposal and they can comment on it. And I mean, you can approve something as a board subject to that public hearing and to receive input and then take final action after the public hearing. But I think in considering this, you'd at least, if you didn't alter the guidelines, I think you'd want to at least address each one of these in some findings or as a part of your resolution, just to show that all of these things have been considered. There are, another thing that could be done if the jobs aren't necessarily going to be created immediately, but there was the potential for job creation a year or 2, 3 years down the road. A price could be set, and then in the event jobs were created, that then part of that price could be rebated back. Also, the price could be paid over a period of time, and portions of the price forgiven if certain things are accomplished. I think with the last building with Lot 1, it kind of went the opposite. The price was fixed at $1 up front, but then if certain things weren't met over a period of time, then there would be kind of a recall provision, and I think they did then buy back and pay KEDA an appraised price because all of those requirements of the agreement weren't met. You could really do it in a reverse structure and have a price set in the event of no job creation, but then have that price reduced if jobs are created down the road, even though they're not currently being considered. And again, an aspect that certainly is helpful to the community is if they're in a building now that is substandard and may not, if they can't stay there, all right, it may be looked at as job retention rather than job creation. I mean, if these jobs are going to go away, if we've got 6 jobs there now, that unless we find a new place for them, they're going to be gone. And then, once they're gone, we'd have to recreate them. So, I mean, I think that conceivably could be a scenario, and I don't know, all the details of the current situation and how bad that building is. If it's a building that's would be considered blighted by the city or that type of thing, that it's so bad that it's bordering on needing to be torn down or removed, and then there are ways. I mean, the whole thought is this board, with its plan, wants to be doing things that help the community, that are positive for the community on a job basis, and on increasing the tax basis, and I think so. So all of those things are going to be looked at. Right? There's not, the guidelines. A is number of jobs created, but there's nothing in the guidelines that says if no jobs are created, you can't do it. It's just one factor among 5 that you have to be considered. So I mean, there's a lot of flexibility that the board has, and again, certainly circumstances today aren't what they were 10 years ago or whenever these guidelines were developed, and today wouldn't have necessarily been deemed appropriate at that point in time. But the realities, are what they are in our community. There hasn't been a lot of new construction in the last few years in the International Falls area. So just construction of the building alone is a very positive thing. I guess if there's a way for the board and Mr. Roche to be flexible and creative in how they put this together, it would, seem to be a positive thing, but it would certainly, I think everybody talks about jobs and the creation of jobs, and that's certainly central. But again, I think if it's, you have to consider whether or not, are there jobs at risk? Are there 6 jobs that are at risk of leaving the community if we don't do something? I think it can be looked at from several different ways.
So just for reference, again, that appraisal from 2005 was $20,000 for the lot, that first, the
The one
land.
you're looking at right now, or the first one?
First,
First.
which is comparable in size.
Hey, Mr. Chair, that property, when it was appraised, had infrastructure?
Correct.
And I guess the question then for Rick would be, is there a potential loss of jobs if this building isn't?
I wouldn't know if there was potential loss for jobs. They would find someplace else to go in town. It's not like they're going to go to town, but the jobs would be moving from one building to another building somewhere.
Mr. Shimon, under any circumstances here, is a public hearing still required for a sale of property under this area that we're talking about? In other words, you mentioned that where there's sale of land here, a public hearing is involved. So in the event that a decision is made here, is the charter, or if I may use that term generically, such that the sale could be made without an appraisal or without a public hearing? Because I think this is fundamental to the structure that should exist. I admire Mr. Roach coming forward here and taking the bull by the horns of having produced, as a result of his efforts in this team that he's got together here, and trying to improve the economic welfare, having proved himself that he can produce, where in the past I witnessed nothing but extreme failure over a long, long period of time. Now, please answer my question with respect to structure.
Mr. Chair. Mr. McCarthy, since KEDA is a public entity, I do believe that a sale of property it owns by state statute generally requires a public hearing. I've not researched it in the last few days to see if there's something. There are oftentimes exceptions to those requirements. I'm not aware of an exception that would apply to this at the present time, but I would need to do further legal research to give you a 100% answer. But I believe that the appropriate action for this board to take at this time, if it feels it wants to move forward, would be to recommend a public hearing to consider the proposal of Mr. Roach. And I think that that's a proposal that should come to the board as a written proposal, so that the public, and typically what would happen is that proposal would be able to be picked in the notice of your hearing. Interested parties could pick up a copy of that proposal at the KEDA office, and then there'd be a public hearing for everybody to provide input, and then at the conclusion of that public hearing, which could either be, immediately following the public hearing or at some later date if the board felt it needed to consider the input, when the final action as to whether or not to conclude the sale. But there could be a developer's agreement. I mean, all of those details, the more details you would have in place at the public hearing, the better the process. That would be the recommended thing, is to have a written proposal from Mr. Roach, a development agreement that has all the details, and then those would be put together in a packet that interested parties could pick up to have available at the public hearing, and the final decision would be made following the public hearing.
Thank you for your input.
I want to build on Dan's comments for a minute. I'll begin by thanking Ricky for telling the truth. I've known him since he was a boy, and he's always been a truth teller. And I hope Ricky gets the lot. I'm on his side in this. I heard your council give you a reason to move to an incentivized, reward-based system. I and my clients are very interested in that. That's our key interest. If you would like us out of the discussion, move there. Show us something in that direction.
I would like to make the comment, I happen to be a citizen who's very interested in the city's tax base. And so I would urge the board to consider some mechanism to bring, to listen to another proposal, I think would be fair, but also to bring a business in within the city limits, because we just lost $2 million of tax capacity, cost the city $46,000 in revenues. And anything we can do, I would welcome a increased tax base from Ricky Roach's business. Just wanted to say that as a councilor.
I wanted to look at Rainier.
Yeah, well, I represent the city.
I know you.
Okay.
Going to the city charter, anytime that we are going to dispose of an asset, that we've got to have a public hearing or public meeting. So I think your recommendation is a good one, that we ought to have at least some type of a special meeting just for the purpose of hearing from the public, with that being advertised.
Mr. Chair, we have done, in the past, when we did both of these transactions, we had a public subsidy hearing as part of that transaction process.
And I would believe, Paul, along with that information that would have to be available to the public and to the members of the board, would be possible appraisal, value of the land. At that point, if we're moving forward, we'd have justification to go over or under what appraisal was or whatever we had to do. And we need to know some kind of value put on that piece of property. Whether it's just, if it's $1, if it's for back in assessments that are due, paid, or if there's a true value of that land. I think the board should know that. And then we can have reason to go in up or down or whatever we have to do with that.
Are you suggesting another appraisal?
Well, that appraisal's 2005, if the board feels that is justified, if that's fairly accurate.
That's 10 years old.
It's 10 years old.
So,
But I think we would have to, if we have a public meeting, we need those numbers to put out to the community, what the property is worth and what we feel the business is worth to the community.
And what you might be interested in paying, right, on the piece of.
Yeah, and that's another unknown right now. When Mr. Roach is willing to accept his offer.
Well, right now, we've got that property, I've been back there, blockable property. It needs substantial fill on the property too. It drops off right to nothing. So the amount of fill that's gonna have to be brought into that property is gonna be considerable also, just to bring it up to height, to be able to build on it. Which is gonna take a year before it's gonna be, once you get the clay in there, yep, exactly.
yes, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the legal advice, and obviously a public hearing would have to take place. On the other hand, we have a well-known generational international falls entrepreneur that has always shown progress. He has always retained jobs. Looking to spend over $250,000 on a site that hasn't been used since it opened. And it's not gonna be. Who else is gonna step forward? I recognize that job creation isn't there, but the investment is. The people who make these kind of investments just don't walk by and drive down the highways every day, they just don't happen. I mean, I would urge my colleagues to somehow find a way to get an agreement with Mr. Roach and get him in there. Otherwise, 10 years from now, we're gonna be driving by and saying, you know, I remember we could have had a building there. And you'd have some action in that part. I mean, up till this time, well, it was a terrific idea and things worked well and, you know, it's been a disaster since those. So anything that can be done to get them in there and to realize this investment, it just doesn't happen here in our town every day. And I say our town and I don't live here.
But I agree, but I think we need to follow the process of a public meeting and have some numbers there, and I'm with you, I support Mr. Roach and what he's done for this community, and family business been here for 50 years, 60 years, I don't know what it is, and they've always done well to communities. But I think there's a process that we need to follow within.
I agree that you go through the process, but I think you try to make it easy for Mr. Roach. And certainly, there should be some clawback provisions in any kind of developers agreement, but let's get them in there. And I don't see other people waving their hands saying, I'll invest $250,000.
Mr. Chair, just to address the appraisal concerns, if this were a bank, 10-year-old appraisal, over 10 years old would not be acceptable. They would require a more current appraisal. So I would encourage, the cost is probably nominal. I'm guessing maybe $300 or $400 for one of the local appraisers to, basically take a look back at comparable sales. That could be a problem because there haven't been any comparable sales in the area recently. But I would, which may go to the market value too. I mean, property's only worth what people are willing to pay for it. And things have changed since 2005. And so I would encourage the board to obtain an appraisal as kind of one of the steps in this process.
I have two questions for Mr. Roach. Do you have a timeline for how long you're willing to work, excuse me, on this request, on your proposal? And do you have a backup plan if it doesn't go through?
The people that, their lease is good until December of 2017. So I have basically a little over a year and a half to get this up and running if I'm gonna do it on that back property. If I don't do it there, I already own the front building in the industrial park. We purchased that outright in December of 2015. I can add on, I can build a building on that property also.
So
But
that's
I
your bet.
can only do so much on a 1 acre parcel of property.
Okay.
You can only build on 50% of the property.
So what's the downside if this proposal doesn't fly, you decide the other one is too small, then what do you do?
Try to find another piece of property.
Okay,
That wouldn't be Kita's.
okay.
It wouldn't be in the industrial park.
It would be out in the general public, you'd look for land.
Yep.
So you're not going to let this project fall by the wayside?
Absolutely not. I'm trying to buy the building behind my building also, which is the brick building with the roof caving in on it. But that's another story. We don't want to go there today.
And just to be clear, Ricky, you were looking at 120 by
120 by 80.
80 building?
Yep.
Approximate cost of construction?
About 277,000. It'll be an all metal building.
Further discussion? Is there a potential for more jobs?
There's always potential. like I say, if I don't get I gotta have something on paper before I can go present this to the company that's already in town.
Sir,
They want me to know, they wanna know that I have the property, I'm ready to build before I can propose it to them. If I don't do that there, I will still build a building, a 120 by 80, and I will do cold weather testing on it if I have to. The amount of money it's gonna bring in, like I say, I can move them from my salvage yard right now, which is in the county, into the city. Which will eliminate me filling my wood stove 4 times a day, and I can actually have natural gas heat. So one way or another, there would be something running out of that business, out of that building.
and there would, okay, once again, we're back to number of jobs, and I think, I don't know, we can rate these qualifications, work and rate them however they want, but that's, in our present list, that's primary. Further discussion? Do I have a proposal and a motion to set a meeting, special public meeting?
Mr. Chair, I'm wondering if we might consider like an hour before the next KEDA meeting, the regular meeting, so I think we're scheduled to meet on June 21st. That's 3 weeks away. If we were to meet at 9 o'clock in a public hearing on a potential sale of the property.
Would we have all those?
Well, I think hopefully you could get an appraisal in 3 weeks and a developer's agreement put together.
Mr. Chair, I would, there's some work that needs to be done, and I think that there should most appropriate to be board action once there's a written proposal, and then the board here could authorize creation of Paul and I and Mr. Roach could work on a development agreement to be considered at the next special meeting, but I would think to set that as the public hearing, I think that's moving a little too fast. I don't think we would, because when we publish our notices, be my recommendation that we have some written materials in place for the public to view as to the exact details of it. And so I would think that at the June 21st meeting, it would be appropriate for this board to consider those details and then adopt a packet to be considered at the public hearing and then put those notices out. And then the public hearing would probably take place sometime in July. Given there are some deadlines and parameters for the amount of notice for those public hearings, so it would probably be sometime in July. But I think that would still leave us plenty of time to meet Mr. Roach's timetable of, this board would be making a decision sometime during the summer, which would leave almost a year and a half to complete the construction and everything else. So I think Mr. Roach's timetable could be met if the board were to follow those. But I think to have the public hearing on the 21st might be a little overly ambitious.
Okay.
Do you think that an appraisal can be secured in 3 weeks?
Yes, I would think so. Yeah, I don't think that would be complicated in that, there are 2 local appraisers that are doing those things, and Paul can check with them and find out, and if one of them's able to get it done quickly and one isn't, that may affect, who you choose to do the appraisal. And I'm not sure, who did the last one.
Grants appraisal.
And they're still doing appraisals. It might be easier for them and perhaps even less expensive for Krantz appraisal to do an update than it would to have somebody totally new coming in starting from scratch. So that may be the first place to check. I would anticipate that Krantz appraisal would be able to have something in advance of that June
Chair, I would offer a motion then to request the executive director and the attorney to secure an appraisal of the proposed property for sale and a proposed developers agreement for consideration at the June 21st meeting of KEDA.
Okay, and that's set for 10 o'clock.
10 o'clock on the
At the
21st.
county
Yes.
board chambers. We have a motion. We have a second.
Second.
We have a second. Discussion, yes.
In addition to the appraisal, will be a potential for a developers agreement to be done?
I think that was part of the motion.
Yes, it was. Yeah, those two items, are there additional items that should be considered at that time?
Well, we may want a written proposal. I mean, we can work it into a development agreement, but if Mr. Roach were to have a formal proposal for consideration, portion of the development agreement, then we know, exactly what we're doing.
So what you're saying is the development agreement may not be done by then, it would be his proposal.
Well, I think we could have, depending, I'm sorry, I thought I turned this off. We may be able to have them both accomplished. But I think in terms of Paul and I putting together a development agreement, it would help if we first got something in writing from Mr. Roach. If we get this, if we got that this week, then next week we could be working on a development agreement. I don't see any problems in presenting all of the information to the board by June 21st, provided we, get exactly, we know exactly what Mr. Roach is proposing and have those things in there. I'm fairly open between now and the 21st, and I'm sure this is the top item on Paul's agenda.
Right? Yes.
As part of that motion, would we want to set a tentative time for a public meeting, or would we set it at the?
Set it at the 21st.
Because at that point, then we would have the board would have a recommendation moving forward, whether to move forward with Mr. Roach, or we would not move forward. At that point, if we were moving forward, we would need a public meeting. Right. Okay. We'll set it on the 21st.
Further discussion?
You want me to do a written proposal and bring it to Paul
Sure.
or to Steve, either
I
one?
think you're working together.
Bring it to Paul? Okay.
We have a pretty standard developers agreement that we used in the past, and we'll go through that process.
Okay.
Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Very good. Thank you for attending, thank you for your comments. We have a bylaws after this. The Harlan's not here, but I think you and I are just today.
We gather.
You'll get that paperwork to Paul?
Yes.